So the big question we have, one that we are posing to everyone that we're speaking to, can we end homelessness? And if so, how?
Oh, absolutely. It's in fact, it's might be better reframed as why haven't we in a country like Canada ended homelessness? Um, and this is for a range of reasons. Um, and I'm gonna qualify it by talking about, and not as much. I don't love the term chronic homelessness because there's some stuff around the term chronic that I think is can be misleading. Let's say maybe ongoing or long-standing homelessness. I don't think we'll ever be able to prevent and stop every form of homelessness. So, the young person that might run away for a range of reasons and be on the streets for a couple of nights or until a provider can find them. And the same might apply to somebody that that might lose their home and run into some challenges and briefly experience homelessness. I don't think that we could end all forms of homelessness permanently. In terms of ongoing homelessness, we've got there's and it's many different levers that need to be pulled, and it's not all. And in fact, a lot of them have nothing much to do with what homelessness service providers do. It has to do with things like job security and affordable housing. And can people have a reasonable shot at renting or buying a home for themselves and their family that they can afford and that they can live in with a reasonable wage? That there's the idea of a basic minimum income, having minimum wage levels that will allow people to live in Canadian environments with respect, dignity, and with housing. There's employment law, there's housing law. I mean, there's a lot of areas that have not a lot to do with what people might think about as homelessness, but those are the ways that the family stress arises and can lead to homelessness for kids as well as for youth as well as for adults. And so there's a lot of prevention efforts. I'm just naming a few there that we could be thinking about. On the Indigenous end of things is, can we be looking at the quality of life on reserves and making sure people have the basic necessities of life on reserves, and we do a proper job of attending to truth and reconciliation commitments, so that we can address intergenerational trauma and the array of discriminations, big and small, that Indigenous populations face. It's like there are many different ways that we could look at the flow-ins that ultimately, like, it would be great if we just didn't need shelters, or if we did have a shelter, it would be the kind of thing where it's just for a small number of people for a couple of nights here and there while all kinds of other stuff happens. And in terms of in the ongoing way, providing opportunities for, again, affordable housing, for employment, and the necessary psychological and social supports off the streets. We know many models of how to do this. Housing first is one. There are others. And then for the small proportion of people who experience homelessness who have major mental health challenges, this is then a health systems issue where can they have adequate and long enough treatments in hospital, and then transitions out of hospital to not to shelters, but to supported housing environments that we know work. There's great evidence behind them. And people with major mental health challenges, such as schizophrenia and addictions, can go on and hold jobs with evidence-based supported employment approaches. I mean, a lot can be done. Again, fundamentally, it will come down to better strategy. If you look at how our systems work, it's a hodgepodge. You look at any homeless serving organization, and they exist from grant to grant on philanthropy, through various government sources, trying to cobble together a range of different funding sources to keep the show on the road. And all the organizations are doing this. We've got underfunded healthcare systems, inadequate supported housing. So it's a real systems lens that's needed, like a major overhaul. And this is not impossible. There are many countries that have undertaken these kinds of overhauls, and it's been done in the past as well. You look at Roosevelt's New Deal, for example, around the Depression, the Great Depression in the United States in the 1930s. That was a massive systemic overhaul that, in fact, hugely reduced homelessness in the United States. It was done, that's nearly 100 years ago. And it's been done in different ways, around the world. It's a minority of cases, and sometimes it didn't last, but we know it can be done. And ultimately just all of society will benefit. This won't be, you know, some people might think, oh, this is a huge amount of money and investment for a small number of people. But it's not the case. It's a system running properly, which would include people experiencing homelessness or at risk, benefits everybody. Yeah, so I'll stop there. So, I mean, that's ultimately just some stuff that I think about to end homelessness. Yes, it's possible. We know the interventions. The whole system approach, that's an area where we need to do some work to understand what is that major whole system overhaul that ultimately will end homelessness, because providing just housing first is not enough to do it. There's going to need to be a lot of things happening.